Arizona falls to the Stanford Cardinal, and some troubling questions emerge. All that and more on Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for giving me the Locked On Wildcats. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. All right, now, Arizona gets demolished against Stanford in Maples Pavilion, and there are a lot of questions coming out of this. First and foremost, I want to stand by that I don't think that people should panic because this happens to good teams. You can look no further than UConn. But there are some real question marks that have emerged in this game and this season. And first and foremost is kind of the lackadaisical defense. Arizona has better personnel than it had last year. I think we know that. You've got players that are more engaged. You got players that are stronger, more physical across the board, and we'll get into the players individually here in a few minutes. But again, Arizona is a better team than it was last year. I'm not breaking any news. But some big question marks have certainly emerged. And a big part of that is your perimeter defense. I'm all right with Arizona giving up some points, against a Purdue team where you've got to stack in the paint because you're going against one of the best big men in the country in Zach Edey. I get that. And, honestly, when you're playing an FAU and John L. Davis is going off, I get all of that as well. But this Stanford performance, honestly, was just pathetic. There's really no other way to put it. Stanford wins 16 of 25 from three-point range. Yes, they were shooting very well. I get all that. They were shooting the lights out, and Arizona's got to be better. But it still is very concerning, though, the amount of wide open looks you got that Stanford got. I don't understand that aspect at all. Not only do I not understand that aspect, when they keep making them, again, this wasn't Salim Stoudemire pulling up from the cactus or Damon Stoudemire making 25 people miss and then hitting a step back. These were wide open white guys making threes a lot of the time. That can't happen. You have to be able to force up on them and hope that they drive by you or whatever. Listen, Kylan Boswell has the talent to be a very good point guard. I'm not breaking any news there. Kylan Boswell's got a lot of, but Kylan Boswell is playing terrible basketball. He's not scoring. And not only is he not scoring, he's not really running the offense. When he's given wide open threes, he's not taking them. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to him a little bit later. But Arizona has enough perimeter players that they should be able to get up on defense and challenge teams as far as making threes. And, I look no further than Caleb Love. And I'm not going to diss on Caleb Love at all because Caleb Love was one of the few players out there that literally looked like he wanted it for Arizona. At 6 foot, at about 6 foot 3, 215, 220 pounds. He wants it. Not only does he want it, he wants the big spot. He wanted the basketball. And not only did he want the basketball, he's okay with getting up there and playing really good defense. He wanted it. I'm cool with that. But with Pello Larson, with KJ Lewis, it was pathetic. And not only was it pathetic, it was really no other way what to say. You've got big, strong, physical perimeter defenders, and it didn't happen. Then you got Jaden Bradley, who I actually think you need to start playing more. I believe Jaden Bradley's got to start playing more basketball for the Wildcats because, yes, he's not a great offensive player. I get all that. But defensively, he's good. He can get up there. He can pester the ball. I think you got to start shaking things up a little bit. But I also don't understand Tommy Lloyd's a strategy about just kind of hoping that teams start missing threes, because at this point we also know that a strategy is to sag off on players, and I'm totally cool with that. But once they start making threes, you got to do something about it, because not only when you got to not only do you have to do something about it, you have to start making players uncomfortable. And Arizona didn't do any of that. Arizona didn't make anybody uncomfortable. And when you're dealing with shooters, when they start getting in a rhythm, then it's all downhill from there. Not only is it all downhill from there, it is a problem, because you can start making threes that you wouldn't otherwise make. You start taking contested threes that you wouldn't otherwise take. There's all kinds of different avenues in play. And Arizona, again, this is the second, or this is becoming a little bit of a pattern at this point. And not only is it becoming a little bit of a pattern, it's also becoming something where you kind of wonder if this is the game plan to just hope teams miss threes. Because if that's really the game plan, that just you hope teams miss threes, you will you're going to be in for a short you're going to be in for a very short march. And again, I think that was part of the reason, though, that you wanted to get better players. You wanted to get more physically gifted players to be able to make a difference. And that has just not happened for Arizona. Not only has it not happened, right now, I think that you've got to start wondering, though, what exactly is some of the makeup of the team? Because, again, like we just talked about, you got more than enough perimeter players. And let's be honest, on the back end, you got players as well that can put up that can at least put up a little bit of a fight, whether it's an Umar Ballo, whether that's a Keyshawn Johnson, heck, even a Mount Crevis. These are big dudes back there. You're not 6 foot. You're not dealing with 6'5" players that can't jump. You've got some stability on the back end if you get beat. And Arizona just is not taking advantage of that, and not taking advantage of that at all. And I think that's what is just wildly frustrating. Again, I'm totally cool with losing to Florida Atlantic and Purdue. Purdue's got the best player in the country. You also had a bunch of dudes that were just shooting lights out, shooting outside themselves. I get that. Again, don't love it, but I get it. With Florida Atlantic, again, you got a guy that was just absolutely shooting the lights out. Totally understand. But Stanford sucks. Stanford was getting creamed by ASU, and they needed a miracle comeback to be able to win. And again, you look at that roster, you got some talent, but it's not a great team by any means. And not only is it not a great team, it's also a squad that feels like about a 500 basketball team. And again, I understand if you're making like a bunch of threes that you wouldn't otherwise normally make. I get that, but you got to also start changing things up at some point. And Arizona didn't do any of that. And I think that's what's just so frustrating to so many Wildcat fans, is that Arizona didn't do any of that. And when you're dealing with a team like Stanford, you got to switch something up. And again, a big part of that is kind of their scheme when it comes to the pick and roll, which we're going to get to in a minute. But first, FanDuel. Let's say that you thought to yourself, man, Arizona's losing today, and I want to place some money on it. Well, if you had placed some money on FanDuel, you'd be a rich person by now. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Check it out. Again, this is a great place to be able to put some money down, be able to make a little bit of money as well, and not only be able to make a little bit of money, to also kind of be the wiser one out there. Some people like myself thought that Arizona was going to blow this game out. Now, you might say, Mike Luke, I'm going against you. And if you're one of those people, you're probably in the right. So again, go against it and go on FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make yourself some money. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, the pick and roll defense is absolutely atrocious. Arizona needs to figure out something that they are going to do with this, because it is not sustainable. What Tommy Lloyd is essentially hoping for, and again, Tommy Lloyd is an awesome coach. Thrilled that he's here. I'm sitting here in my living room talking about it, so take it for what it's worth. But you got to figure out something on that pick and roll defense, because it's not good enough. Basically, going under every single screen, and not only going under every single screen, but then also not hedging out, basically being lackluster in both ways, because there's never a strong hedge. And not only is there never a strong hedge, there's also anybody that's coming downhill knows I'm going to be able to get the shot up that I want, because Arizona's not going to be able to stop it. And not only is Arizona going to be able to stop it, they're not going to be able to do anything about it. And I'm going to keep coming down and doing the same thing. I think at this point, you got to figure out something what to do there. And a big part of that too is I think you've got to start hedging more. I think you have the athletes to be able to hedge and then get back. You got to start doing that. And not only do you have to start doing that, I think you've got to start making that part of your base pick and roll defense. A big part of the pick and roll defense is, with Arizona, they've employed is getting out and, like I said, hoping guys miss shots. Well, that's fine if they're missing shots, but they haven't been missing shots. And let's be honest, if you're going against a physically more talented team, you're more than okay with them playing off you and saying, all right, well, if I can make my shots and we got a chance to win. You got better athletes for a reason. Use them. I think a big part of one of my big frustrations with Sean Miller was that he had these great physically imposing teams, and you're playing a pack line defense, hoping the teams would miss. Now, a big part of the pack line defense also, it prevented you from getting out and running. And when it prevented you from getting out and running, well, if you got these athletes that love to get out in transition, what are we really doing here? That to me is an issue as well. But I think you got to start hedging harder, and I think you got to start taking more chances. Now, if that means that you start playing KJ Lewis and Jaden Bradley more, then honestly, I'm all for it. With Kylan Boswell, listen, going into the year, I didn't think Kylan Boswell needed to be an All-American, but I did think that he needed to be an All-Conference player. And people around him have talked about it, and this isn't a flaw or anything, but people around him have talked about from day one that they wanted him to be a 2-year player. They thought he'd be in the NBA, but I don't see that at all. I don't see any team drafting him, honestly, and I just don't know what his role is, to be honest with you, at the U of A. And a big part of the reason I don't know what his role is in the NBA is he's not a lockdown defender, and that to me is where we need to get to first. Is that I think everybody was hoping that he was going to be a better defender than Kirk Kriisa, because Kirk Kriisa was a terrible defender. And Boswell has the capability. He's stronger than Kriisa. He's physically more gifted than Kriisa. He can, but he also can't. He also is just not playing good defense. And offensively, he's been kind of a train wreck. He's not making threes. He's when he's got an open three, he's passing it up. There seems to be some kind of weird, he doesn't like giving the ball to Caleb Love at the end of games for whatever reason. That might just be something that was just like a one game off or whatever. But either way, he's been awful. And Arizona needs him to be good. Arizona needs a good Kylan Boswell. And I was talking about this with somebody the other day, and he's like, oh, well, why didn't you rip on Kerr like this? Because Kerr was limited. Listen, Kerr, I was ecstatic when Kerr left. I applaud him for what he did, but Kerr couldn't shoot. Kerr just talked the whole game. Kerr just wasn't that good. Kylan Boswell, we've seen Kylan Boswell. We know what he can do. We know he can be good. And we need to see that Kylan Boswell again. And if we don't see that Kylan Boswell, then I think you got to start looking at some other options. Jaden Bradley to me is fascinating. Now, listen, Jaden Bradley can't shoot. I get that. But what Jaden Bradley can do is he's going to be engaged in the game. He can finish. He can finish around the hoop, and not only can he finish around the hoop, he can also. He also looks like it really means something to him. And not only does it look like it really means something to him, I think that he's. This. It just looks like he leaves more of it out there. Now you could say, well, what does that mean? And that's probably a fair question, but I'm also kind of at the stage where I need to see more of it, not less of it. And we're not really at that point yet. So I'd like to kind of see a little bit more Jaden Bradley. You just kind of wonder, has Kylan Boswell been reading his press clippings, whatever the case has been, because since that Michigan State game, he's been in a terrible funk, and Arizona needs more out of him. I'm not going to really rip on Caleb Love at all, mainly because Caleb Love is the one dude out there that looks like he wants it. And not only does he look like he wants it, it looks like he's kind of like, all right, I'll do what I got to do. And whether that means, D'ing up defensively or getting to the rack, whatever that case may be, he's been that guy, and he's been impressive doing that. So not going to beat him up a ton. Pella, you need more out of Pella. Tommy Lloyd has talked up Pella quite a bit, and, deservedly so. But all the people talking about, he's an NBA player, all of this, I just don't really see that. And it's games like this that kind of reminds you of that. But again, he is still a very good college player. With KJ Lewis, I'd like to see KJ start to play more. I think you got to start playing KJ 25 minutes a game. And because he's unique from an athleticism perspective, a strength perspective, and a want to perspective. And that's something that Arizona just hasn't had in a minute. I would love to see a little bit more KJ Lewis time, please. But again, that's where it is. I'd like to see some difference. And Keyshawn Johnson, listen, Keyshawn Johnson has been absolutely fantastic this season. And not only has he been, but listen, Keyshawn Johnson's a fifth-year senior. He's been there before. We got to start seeing more. And not only do we have to start seeing more out of him, it's got to be a game in, game out effort. Because again, he's 6'7", 225, 230 pounds, super athlete. And again, he's shown against really good teams that he can be the best player on the court. Even though Arizona lost to Purdue, he was awesome. Against Michigan State, he was fantastic. You need to see more of that. He's also a tone setter. And when you're dealing with tone setters, you will need guys that are like that. And Keyshawn, I think, can 1,000% be that guy, but it's going to be a little bit of an issue if you don't get more out of him. And I think that's where Arizona fans are probably a little bit frustrated that you're not getting more, because again, when you're a fifth-year senior, you should be able to do that, especially when you got those kind of skills. Now, that all said, this is still a very, very good team, and we're going to talk about what Arizona does going forward. Thanks for keeping it locked on, Wildcats, and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, what does Arizona need to do going forward, my friends? Well, that is the question. That is the million-dollar question that I think a lot of people have. The first thing that I think you got to do is Arizona has to get more focus to start games out. This is another game where Arizona gets down 9-0, and it feels like this is happening all the time. And another thing I don't get, coming out of timeouts, Arizona is struggling, halftime Arizona is struggling as well, which shows me a lack of, preparation, mentality. Those are easy things that you got to adjust. You can't keep starting games and then digging yourself out of holes. That just can't be the case. And so not only can that just not be the case, you got to start figuring something out there. And then I think you've really also got to figure out from a player perspective who's doing what. And I think you got to sit down with Kylan Boswell and be like, listen, Kylan, we know that you've got all the skill. We know that you've got skill. We know that you can play, but this just isn't good enough. And what's going on? What are we missing? And honestly, I would just start telling him, listen, you got the open three-point shot. You shoot the shot. If you go 0 for 12, cool. Because we know that you can make those down the road. It'll be beneficial. I think you got to start doing that. Because his confidence level is obviously taking a hit. Listen, when you're going into games afterwards and you're searching out Mike Luke's tweets to go and like them, that's not something that you probably should really be doing. Not that I care about it, but the big part of it is that I don't think your focus is on the right things. So you got to keep that in mind. And then Caleb Love, I would just tell Caleb, keep doing what you're doing, man. Listen, it's not going to always be perfect, but I totally understand that you're a good basketball player. Not only are you a good basketball player, you're also a dude who seriously wants the ball in big spots. Umar Ballo, leader of men, that's an interesting one because Umar, I think as we're finding out, is very, very matchup specific, and that there's going to be games when he's fine. And I do understand the whole thing about how he can kind of tear or, bring down a defense because he's so big and you got to keep, pushing on him and whatnot. I get all that. But you also got to, I think you also have to wonder, just in certain games, is this a right fit for him? Does Arizona need to go small, whatever the case may be? And then with Pella Larson, I need more out of Pella. Again, I need I need 14 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists out of Pella consistently. The thing with Pella that's driven me up a wall is that, one game he can give you that, and then another game will give you 2 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, or 2 assists. And you're like, all right, well, is that the same guy? And Pella is also in his 5th year in college. Pella is also in his, Pella's going to be 23 this year. Another guy, you got to be able to really kind of expect him to step up a little bit. And that hasn't really happened. But overall, though, I still expect Arizona to run roughshod over the conference. I think you're going to get a very, very motivated Arizona team going forward. But listen, if we're sitting here talking about it and Arizona doesn't look good Thursday, then you're going to start having some problems. You're going to start wondering, all right, well, what exactly is going on? And then after Thursday, if you're still dealing with some issues, then you start maybe there's something inherently more wrong. But again, I'm not going to lose it over this game. Again, it was a pathetic performance. There's no doubt about it. Arizona got punched in the face. They didn't do anything back, and that's something that has to be rectified. Now, tomorrow coming up, we're going to talk a little bit of Arizona football. We're going to talk a little bit of Jedd Fisch. What's going on with Jedd Fisch? What's going on with Arizona football? And we are going to also get into a little bit of what the future holds. There's been some transfer portal news, all kinds of that stuff. But again, the end of the day with this Arizona basketball team, it's still a very good team, but they have hit a little bit of a rut. And I think there's certainly some things that they need to work out. But as always, very much appreciate you making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. And again, I am your host, Mike Luke. You've been listening to Locked On Wildcats podcast. And again, thanks for making this your first listen of the day. We will be back with you tomorrow.